Good morning. Good morning. Oh my god, the first stream of 2025. Gotta clear my throat. Ah, it's so early. it's early. January 1st. Welcome to the stream. I didn't end up streaming last night or yesterday at all. You know, New Year's Eve and all that. I said that my actual plans were up in the air, and they finally solidified to the point where I was like, I'm not gonna stream. So, we're here on a Wednesday morning for some light Higurashi reading since we didn't do it like yesterday. So, it won't probably be much because my main goal here today on stream is to finish Project Eden Gardens trial, chapter 1 and trial. Which will do most of the majority of today. But I do want to get maybe an hour or so reading, continuing of Saikoroshi, which we've had some fun doing starting last week. We also didn't get very far, but I think if we read an hour or so, I think we might get close to within striking distance then of finishing it on Saturday. I think. I don't know 100% no. That's my uneducated guess. So we'll read for about an hour here this morning. This was me basically last night on New Year's Eve. I looked just as majestic as this, sitting next to a window with the moonlight coming in. Alright, quick recap. So we started Saikoroshi last Higurashi stream. Basically, due to after having survived the tragedy that was the previous 8 chapters of Higurashi, Rika gets into a bicycle accident and somehow gets shoved into a fragment that is completely different than what she had been experiencing prior. Some characters are different as far as if they're there, if they exist, their actions towards her. And she's like, this sucks. And it went back in time. So she's like, not only did I survive everything, but now I'm in an unfamiliar place. And I hate this. And what are the chances I'm going to have to redo everything? And then at the end, she was like, I got to get into contact with Hanyu. And then she was able to establish like this very faint connection to Hanyu. And Hanyu's like, you got to fucking find the fragment to get out of there because I can't come there because of some reasons. So Rika's like, all right, cool. I'll find a fragment thing. With no hints basically as to how to find it. She's like, I just got to find. So she's in this weird timeline universe thing back in time, but also completely different trajectory. And then, yeah, that's basically where we're at. And that's where we ended last time. So let's continue with about another hour or so before we switch, probably. I'm feeling a light hour to hour and a half of reading, I think, for Saikoroshi here. Gotta get into reading mode. I'd hoped Satoko would be there. What's my mouse doing? Okay, we're fine. Panicking. Not even my cursor, my physical mouse was being weird. You couldn't see it. I'd hoped Satoko would be there when I woke up in the morning, or that morning. I'd hoped this baffling world was just a half-awake dream of mine. No, Rika, it's not a dream. Wake up, you gotta fucking find the fragment. So, we're starting off 2025. So, with a weird energy. So when I awoke, not to a familiar ceiling, but to the one in the Frude main house, I could feel nothing but disappointment. My mind hazy, I recalled the situation I'd been put into. Thanks to my own carelessness, I'd gotten lost in this strange world. Man, I doubled down. I was thinking about last stream where I was talking about how, like, the punishment doesn't fit the crime of her accidentally getting into a car accident thing. I still feel that after a few days in between that last stream. Not only do I still feel it, I maybe feel it more strongly. It's unfair. A little kid gets into a car accident thing, and then it's like, oh, punishment time, you go to a bad place. Again, I stand by. If she survived... if she survived the horrible 1983 summer, and then she's like, cool, I've escaped that perpetual hell, and now I'm going to have me and my friends go rob a convenience store, and then she got into an accident and then got shoved to this timeline, then I'd be like, oh, that's fair, because she was utilizing her now free time, her now rescued time to do something bad. But like, she just got into a car accident. Or not a car accident. She was on a bicycle and then got run over by a car. You know, I think I'm making a fair point. It's like she has to be on guard forever. It's just like, what? So, I mean, what are the implications? How, I mean, maybe this is something that'll be answered as we continue to read, but like, what? For the rest of her life? Also, is this like a thing that could happen? I mean, this has bigger implications, potentially. Like, if Rika turns, dies of natural age at the age of 80 or 90 or whatever, and then what? She's gonna get shoved into a different fragment? Can she just never die? She'll never be able to rest in peace? Such big implications that we'll never probably know the answer to. Inquisitive minds want to know, though. Or at least mine does. Hanyu's power couldn't reach here, so it'd be incredibly difficult to escape. It was like trying to climb up the spider's thread to paradise. But the spider's thread was still there. No matter how thin it was, its presence meant there was still a chance to discover what was blocking Hanyu's power. And I didn't even know what it looked like. The only possible clue was that Hanyu was the deity of Hinamizawa, so it was probably in the village somewhere. I picked up the crystal ball, which I'd snuck out of the ritual implement storehouse. The ball gave off a weak and somehow unnatural light. I pressed it to my forehead. I could sense a faint presence that only I, as a witch, could feel. I was sure that whatever I needed to find, I would get the same feeling from it as this. But again, like the crystal ball, I'd probably have to hold it to my forehead to sense anything. It didn't seem like things would be as simple as wandering about until I felt something. But if it was related to Hanyu's power like the crystal ball was, it was almost certainly in that storehouse. Unfortunately, the storehouse was a complete mess of everything from ancient torture devices to piles of old documents to mounds of trash I didn't even know how to use. The only place with any semblance of cleanliness was the space around the vessel and the altar. Finding anything, especially an object as small as this crystal ball, would be no simple matter. Rika! Eat your breakfast and hurry on to school! I heard my mother's voice from the kitchen. The school in this world wasn't the one I went to. If I had the time to go somewhere I didn't belong, then I should be using it to search the storehouse. But there was no proof my search would only take 1 or 2 days. I really hated to say it, but since I didn't even know what it looked like, maybe I needed to prepare myself for the search to take years. Oh god, if I didn't go to school, Chie, ever conscientious, would call the house to see if I was staying home that day. If that happened, it would cause trouble with both the school and my parents. I couldn't imagine how much time this search would take me. Alright, I got a plan for you, Rika. Fake your death. If you pull off a fake, convincing death, then no one will expect you to show up to school. You know what I mean? Then you have all the free time to look for this thing. God, I'm a genius. I'm so smart. I'm full of ideas. If my parents grew suspicious, things would get harder. Slow and steady wins the race, I guess. Although it's frustrating, for weekdays it would be better to pretend I was going to school like normal. I let out a languid sigh, got up, and decided to eat breakfast. During mealtime, my mother's ramblings about how I was never allowed to go into the ritual storehouse again steadily made the food taste worse. My mother was always insistent and long-winded. I hated this part of her. The elders in the village laughed and said she couldn't help it, since she did it for her only beloved daughter, but to me, she was just a nuisance. Tough love wasn't what I needed at the moment. The only thing I could be thankful for was maybe that I didn't have to make breakfast for myself. But I could do it on my own, so I almost would have rather she left it to me. After I was done eating and started getting ready for school, my mother continued to nag me about making it on time. Ah, how aggravating. Maybe going to school wasn't so bad. I wouldn't have to see my mother's face for half a day. Damn. I thanked her for the food. God, Rika is so used to not seeing her parents. At the point she's now reintroduced to her parents, she's like, oh, God. I thanked her for the food, cleaned my plate and utensils in the sink, and left immediately for school. I'm just gonna place a bet that, like, the way to establish the connection to Hanyu isn't going to be, like, maybe it is, but, like, somehow to reveal the way to then get back to her own timeline, she's gonna have to, it's gonna be something symbolic. She's gonna have to learn to love the people that are available to her in this universe or something like that. That is my guess right now, is that it's going to be, since this I know is like a shorter story arc and kind of like a chapter 9 to the whole thing, something tells me that she's going to have to learn to be like, oh, I actually, I'm going to treasure that I have this one chance to, see my parents again, or whatever the case is. Something along those lines. That feels like that would be how you would wrap up a story of some sort like this, in my opinion. If everything was going to betray my expectations anyway, I wish class would too. But even in this world, class went the exact same way as the world I knew. I thought I'd escaped that world, and now it's repeating. Thinking that way made me feel even more listless. Normally, I would distract myself by teasing Satoko, but her seat was far away from mine. She was probably also so bored with class, she didn't know what to do with herself. Satoshi, earnestly studying in the next seat over, was constantly trying to get her to focus. Mion seemed to be butting into Rina's business too, but they weren't fooling around. It was a strange, though pleasant sight. They were helping one another learn. Actually, they weren't the only pleasant sight. Everyone in the classroom was like that. I felt like I was the only one left out. I didn't know whether my seat was in its own row because of the odd number of students, or if I'd chosen this seat on purpose in this world, but it felt like my seat was separated from the rest of the classroom. When lunchtime came, I felt even more alienated. My classmates formed groups with friends and took out their food. The club members who would always eat with me weren't here. Satoko was part of a circle of several friends, including her brother. There was no place for me to wedge myself into. Mion and Reina were sitting face to face as they ate. No room for me there either. And nobody asked me if I wanted to eat with them. And they had fun eating their own meals, so this seemed natural, like it was something that happened every day. For a short while, I waited, hoping for Satoko or Mion or Reina to invite me over. After the clock's minute hand moved 5, and then 10 places, I realized I might even be left behind in eating, and finally gave up and opened up my bento box. Ah, this is so sad. Inside were the leftovers of last night's burned hamburg steak, and white rice with nori seaweed that was now sticky. Spinach wrapped with gooey nori, and the remains of kimpira with chopped burdock root, also burned. I guess I'd forgotten about that. For some reason, my mother overcooked everything. Summer is dangerous if you don't let the heat in, was a favorite phrase of hers. She would cook steaks until they were rock hard, and even when she made fish, she'd turn half their insides to ash. Even Satoko was better than that. At least she knew how hot to cook things. Ah, and when I learned how to cook from Hanyu and started to make things better than my mother, she must have been happy. She must not have been happy. It tasted terrible, too. No presentation either. If Mion decided to have a bento contest and I only had this, I'd end up in last place. But there was no club in this world, so I didn't have to worry about that. Satoko's happy laughter not being directed at me made me feel sad. Suddenly, our eyes met. Did my feelings get through? Satoko burst out of her seat and glared at me. What are you staring at? If you have something to say it. Damn. Fuck off, Satoko. I don't have anything to say. Stop it, Satoko. You just happened to look at each other, didn't you? It didn't just happen. She was staring at me this whole time. It was getting gross. Come on. Satoko and her friends began whispering amongst themselves while looking at me. I couldn't hear what they said, but I could easily imagine them enjoying themselves. I'm sorry. I won't stare at you. I hope not. You are making my cream croquettes taste worse. Don't make Rika cry. I angled my desk a little so that I couldn't see Satoko and the others. At first, I'd called this world's Satoko cold, but it looked like I was mistaken. This world's Satoko either didn't like me, or outright hated me. And the other kids close to my age seemed to have formed a community around her, with no place for me in it, so they all hated me too. The hardened, ash-like steak tasted of salt. Why did I have to feel this sad and lonely when I ate? In all the other worlds, all the club members would be enjoying lunch together. Satoko would be there, and Rina, and Mion and Kechi. Everyone would be having fun, and spending their break cheerfully and noisily. That was when Reina came over and peered into my bento box. Rika-chan, you have steak and spinach for lunch today? That looks good. You know, aside from it being burnt to shit, apparently. It was clear that Reina had come over to try and comfort my distress, and for some reason, that was frustrating, so I didn't want to answer her. When I stayed silent, she held out an octopus-shaped sausage in front of me. I'll trade your spinach for my octopus. Okay? Oh, good girl, Reina. She's so kind. Reina, trying to be as nice as I ate lunch alone, hated by my classmates, I just couldn't accept it. I suddenly said I was going to wash my hands, then left, and in a bathroom stall I covered my face with toilet paper and cried. The tears soaked through the paper and crinkled it up, but I didn't care. This was fine. It was better if I didn't have friends in this world. I had plenty of friends in the one I needed to return to. There, even Satoko was my irreplaceable best friend, and all the club members, who would never leave me during lunch, alone during lunch hour, were waiting for me. Why would I be sad that some Satoko I didn't know was being mean to me in a world I didn't care about? Why would I be? But, despite the lies I told myself, I couldn't stop crying for a while. I decided to steel my resolve and wait for school to end. Then I'd run back home, say I was going out to play, and sneak into the ritual implement storehouse again. That was the only way I could get back to my original world. I had to try and do my best for that purpose alone. Okay. I looked into the mirror in the bathroom to see a face red from crying. If Chie saw me like this, things would probably get even more complicated. I washed my face, then spent the rest of lunch break quietly in a corner in the classroom. After school, I literally dashed out of the building. It'd be a huge pain if I ended up caught in the rush of the other classmates as I headed out to go play. I think Satoshi called after me, but I ignored him. He was probably just trying to apologize for his sister about what happened during lunch. I didn't care about that. I didn't want to stay in this horrible world a second more than I needed to. I ran full speed back to the house, ignored my mother when she asked, as usual, if I had any homework, and searched for a lantern. Then, I told her I was going out to play, and without waiting for a response, burst out of the house. She's a girl on a mission. Then I went around the shrine and looked for my father. I saw a note hanging on the assembly hall that said there was a shrine association meeting. I could hear my father's voice amidst the light-hearted chatter. It was the same opportunity I had yesterday. Today, I have to be careful not to let on that I was inside. After making sure nobody was looking, I climbed up the tree I'd gotten the hang of yesterday. I had been scared of the height before, but I wasn't afraid any longer, probably because I'd cried my eyes out and resolved myself during lunch. What I really had to be afraid of wasn't heights, or my parents, or the cold-hearted Satoko. It was not being able to return to my original world. The next scariest thing would be losing contact with Hanyu, I think. In the darkness of the storehouse, I took the crystal ball out of my pocket. Its weak glow seemed a little more energetic than yesterday. Maybe if she rested, a little of her power would come back. Nevertheless, it was still weak. If I wasted it on fruitless conversation, the light might go out entirely. I firmly squashed down the desire to check and make sure I could still call her and turned on the lantern. It was time to go treasure hunting. Was there anything around? Anything only I could feel? Something that felt the same as this crystal ball? Somewhere. I closed my eyes, honed my senses, and hoped. But all I heard were the cries of cicadas. I hadn't expected anything else. It looked like this would be a tough nut to crack. Too optimistic. Searching the entire storehouse. How much time would that take? I didn't want to imagine it. But I had to do it, or I couldn't go home. I'd do it systematically. Start in the corner, and go in order. Without knowing what it looked like, I'd start in the corner and go from there, not even letting water past. And despite all that, I had no proof it was even in here. I felt like it'd be easier to just fight Takano and the mountain dogs again. I'd rather risk my life than go on a potentially fruitless search. What a disaster. I don't think it's going to get any weaker. I can hear your voice about as loudly as I could before. Famous last words. It's risky. Which means, like always, it'll only get to you weakly. I guess there was no need for us to chat. No, I think chatting is exactly what you need to do right now, Rika. Maybe. Thanks. I'll talk now. I'm pretty sure I searched the storehouse as well as I could. But I have nothing. I searched for about a week, but I don't even know what the thing I'm searching for looks like. And even if I did find it, I might have put it down again without realizing. Oh. Honestly, this is really hard. If only I knew what it looked like. Or had some proof it was in the storehouse. Being locked in here for so long is going to make me go crazy. I understand. I know it's a very difficult search. I'm doing my best too, to see if I can at least find out what the fragment looks like. And? Did you find anything out? Rika, in your world, fragments are interpreted as feelings. When those feelings reside in something, they become fragments. I understand the logic, but that doesn't give me much of a hint. Oh.
それからそのかけらをこちらの世界に戻す方法なのですが、おそらくそちらの世界での形を失えば良いのではないかと思いますです。
And as for how to return the fragment to this world, I think that it needs to lose its form in that world.
形を失うって何？
What does that mean?
壊せってこと？
Do I have to break it?
それも完全な形でなのです。
Yes, and completely.
人の世からなくなることで神の世に送ることができるのです。
If it's lost from the human world, you can send it to the world of the gods.
質量保存の法則って知ってる？
Do you know about the law of conservation of matter?
完全に物を消すなんて不可能よ。
It's impossible to destroy something completely.
いえ、ですから形を壊せばいいのです。
Well, that's why I'm saying you only need to destroy its form.
わかりますか、リカ？
Understand, Rika? Doi.
古来から人が神に物を送る方法の中でそれを満たす方法がありますのですよ。
Even in ancient times, people used methods like this to send things to the gods.
そうか。わかったわ。
I see. Alright. A way ancients sent tributes to the gods. A way to get rid of something from the human world.
焼けってことね。
You're telling me to burn it?
焼いて灰にして天に送る。
Burn it into ash and send it into the sky? Just like my mom when she's making food for me?
そうです。
That's right!
焼いて灰にすることで形は失われて意味を失い人の世から消え去りますのです。
By burning something to ashes, it loses its form, loses its meaning, and vanishes from the human world.
なるほど。
I see.
かけらが宿る何かを焼いて灰にしろってのね。
So I need to burn whatever is housing the fragment.
その何かが簡単に燃やせるものであることを祈るわ。
I pray that it's easy to set on fire.
岩だった日には溶鉱炉にでも放り込まなきゃならなくなるわね。
If it was a boulder, I'd have to throw it into a blast furnace or something.
実はリカ、
Actually, Rika,
そのかけらが宿るのが物ではなく人である可能性もありますのです。
the fragment might not only be in an object, it's possible it could be in a person too. Ah, okay. So we must sacrifice someone into flames.
なるほど。かけらは思いなんだもんね。
I see. Because the fragments are feelings.
物に宿るばかりってわけじゃないかもね。
They might not only reside in objects.
でも羽生、仮に人だったらどうするの？
But Hanyu, if it was a person, what would I do?
まさか焼いて灰にしろって言うんじゃないでしょうね。
You're not telling me to burn them to ash, I'm sure.
人の意味は命の形が失われた時点で失われます。
The meaning of a human disappears the moment they lose their life.
そりゃそうよね。
That would make sense.
死体はもはや人じゃないわ。
Corpses aren't people anymore.
ってことは、もしかけらが宿っているのが人だったら。
So if the fragment is residing in a person... Oh. I believed until now I'd been searching for an object, but maybe it doesn't even have to be that. I'd have no problem burning an object. But if it wasn't an object but a person...
嫌な話ね。
I don't like this.
この世界、どういうわけか
This world,
嫌な想像に限って当たるのよ。
for some reason, only the bad ideas turn out to be true.
僕もそうでないことを祈るしかないです。
I can only pray it doesn't turn out like that.
嫌な想像は大抵当たる。お逆手にとって先にそれを探るのも手ね。
If only bad ideas turn out to be true, then I could take advantage of that and search there first.
仮に人だったらやっぱりお社様に縁の近い人？
If it was a person, they'd be closely connected to Oishiro-sama, right?
はい、
Yes,
おそらくは
most likely.
それが私自身
Is
と
it
いう可能性は？
Is it possible it's me?
いえ、ないです。
No, it isn't.
リカ自身が僕を拒むかけらだったなら、こうして僕と話すこともできないはずなのです。
Rika's about to jump into a fire. If you were the fragment rejecting me, you wouldn't be able to talk to me right now.
となれば、次はフルデ神社神主の父か、フルデ家の血を継ぐ母か。
Which means, next is my father, head priest of the Furude Shrine, and my mother, carrier of the Furude lineage.
もしそうだったら、ぶっ殺せばいいってわけね。
If it was one of them, I'd just have to kill them, right? Oh. My human morality refused the idea of killing my parents, but that was nothing a world-crossing witch needed to think about. For someone with a true world somewhere else, this was a false world, meaning it was the same as a dream. Murdering someone in a dream was no different from doing it in delusion or daydream. There was nothing to consider about committing the sin in this world. Hanyu was making sad oh noises, so I told her how I felt.
偽善しゃぶるのはやめて。
Stop being such a hypocrite.
ならあんたは元の世界へ帰るのは諦めてもいいって言うのね。
Would you rather give up on returning to our original world? Oh.
あんたは卑怯よ。
You're a coward.
手を汚す決断を私にだけさせて、自分の手は汚さないっていうつもり。
You're going to force me to dirty my hands while never dirtying yours.
罪を誰か一人にかぶせれば、他はみんな罪にまみれずに済んで好都合。
Convenient, isn't it? If you can blame it all on one person, nobody else will be marked with sin.
私はちょうどいい人柱ってわけね。
I'm the perfect human sacrifice. I felt those words were a little harsh on Hanyu. For a short while, she remained silent, not saying anything. But her breathing made it sound like she wanted to say something, but was hesitating.
私は元の世界に帰りたい。
I want to go back to the final world.
レナがどこかの世界で言ったわ。
Rina said this once.
幸せになるにはどこまでの努力が許されるんだろうってね。
I wonder how much we're allowed to struggle in order to be happy.
私はその努力に限界なんてないって思った。
I didn't think there was a limit to that effort. Why can't she change that? There's no limit to effort. But you have to talk a lot of people to get their advice on whether your efforts are misplaced or not. That's why I was talking about it with Hanyu, the only one who shared my current situation. And Hanyu said that if the object possessing the fragment was a person, I had to kill them. I'd want to avoid that, of course, if there were any other way. But if she said that was the only way, then I wouldn't hesitate. That was all.
僕も元の世界に帰りたいのです。
I want to go back too.
そうね。
Yeah,
私もよ。
me too.
かけらが宿っているのが人でないことを祈ってます。
I'll be praying that the fragment isn't held by a person.
祈ってて。
Please do.
私も祈ってるわ。
I will too.
あと謝るわ。
And I apologize.
きついことを言い過ぎた。
I was too hard on you.
あんたにできることはヒント探しと私が挫折しないよう士気を保つことくらいなのよね。
All you can do is look for clues and keep my spirits up so I don't get discouraged.
自らの手で鍵を探せないもどかしさを理解してなかったわ。
I didn't understand how annoying it must be not to be able to look for the key yourself.
理科よりは辛くありませんのです。
It isn't as hard as it is for you, Rika.
せめて理科の心が疲れてしまわないよう僕にはこうしてお話をしていたわってあげることしかできませんのです。
The only thing I can do is at least be here to care for you so that your heart doesn't tire out.
ありがとう。
Thanks.
あんたとするヨタ話がこの世界では一番楽しいわ。
These idle chats with you are the most enjoyable thing about this world.
悪夢がその間だけ冷めるような感じ。
It's like I wake up from the nightmare for a few minutes. Oh. I see. I sort of understood why she said chatting could be important. Hanyu was the only one I could talk to from my original world. If I lose contact with Hanyu, maybe my connection to that world would weaken and my memories would blur. And that would simply give birth to a miserable, broken-hearted girl, living a delusion that this world wasn't the one she belonged in.
私に任せなさい。
Leave it to me.
必ずあんたと一緒にあの世界へ帰るわ。
I swear, we'll go back there together.
だからあんたも引き続き何かヒントを集めて。
You keep looking around for any clues you can find.
私も何か進展があったらまたあんたに連絡するわ。
If there are any developments on my end, I'll contact you again.
わかりましたです。
I understand.
リカ、しっかり。
Rika, hold it together.
ファイトオーなのですよ。
Go for it. Yay! Remember?
おー。
Yay. I couldn't hear Hanyu anymore. The crystal ball's light had grown weaker than ever. But as long as it had its otherworldly glow, then I could keep believing this wasn't the world I was supposed to live in. Before, I might have shed a tear or two by now, but all the tears I could cry had dried up. I gripped the crystal ball tightly, savoring the cheer Hanyu had given me. Do your best. Go for it. Yay. I moved over to a spot with a pile full of documents. If it could interfere with Hanyu, it had to be related to the legends of Oishiro-sama. So maybe I thought a clue would be written in one of the documents in that pile. Maybe even if the thing I searched for wasn't in here, I could find a clue to it instead. I took a few documents from the pile and packed them into the knapsack I brought with me. I could read some, but couldn't understand any of the others. If something important was in one of the indecipherable ones, I would have no way of knowing. But I shouldn't think about that right now. I pulled out the few documents I could read and decided to read them in secret at school and in bed. As I went in and out of the storehouse, the chances of my parents finding out increased. In that sense, this would lower that risk, which made it a little easier for me. Maybe parents did understand their children best, and would be the first ones to help them, but that was when they were normal and not a witch like me. If their daughter started babbling about not being from this world, they'd probably tie her down and summon a noisy ambulance. If I were a little more cunning, I could flatter my parents and put the work in to make this world a little more bearable. But the more I thought about this world not being the one I lived in, the more apathetic I felt towards interacting with those who were here. That was probably why it seemed like I was being more and more isolated in class. Of course, maybe you could say that was my own fault. That was the kind of world this was at the moment I arrived. I don't dare let anyone say that this is my fault. Of course, not a single person could tell the difference between Rika Furude and me, anyway. Who is me? The me that isn't Rika Furude. Who is she? I came around to a quiet electronic beep. I looked at my watch and noticed it was already evening. Being in here made me lose track of time. The other day I was out way past curfew and was scolded for a long time. The alarm on my watch was to prevent that. Letting my relationship with my parents grow any worse would make everything else more troublesome. I should call it quits for today. With practiced motions, I climbed the bundle of chains and headed through to the exit of the roof. When I returned to the main house, surrounded by the cries of Higurashi that I had grown completely tired of, there was a tightly packed case of beer near the front door, and 3 bottles of wine. The beer case was probably for a drinking party at the Shrine's assembly hall or something. My father didn't drink beer because he liked it, so I knew it had to be for the assembly hall. They delivered it here before the party so he could chill it beforehand in the assembly hall refrigerator. And the wine probably belonged to my father. My father enjoys Western spirits, and wine most of all. And wine, at the same time, was something I enjoyed as well. Before, after my parents had died in 1981, I'd gotten wine by bringing it from the main house, but my parents were alive in this world, so I couldn't do that. I stared at the bottles longingly as I tried to open the door, receiving the clack of its lock in response. I took a key from my pocket, unlocked the door, went in, and saw a note addressed to me right upon entering. It was from my mother. The note said an accident had suddenly occurred at the Kimiyoshi house, and they'd gone out to help with a memorial service. They'd be late coming back, and so on and so forth. Written as a postscript was a notice that the brewer would be bringing alcohol, and to take it inside the front door once I got back for them. I see. I must have been referring to all this. If the person had come while I was here, I could have told them to put it inside, but I couldn't bear to see them outside like this, put here before I got back. And it would be a pain if my mother started rambling about me being inconsiderate later. I made a sour face, not caring who saw, and pulled the case of beer through the front door. Next, I stood before the wine bottles and solidified my thoughts. Couldn't there have been a slip-up with the order? It was a brewery in a small village. If my father called to say he'd ordered one more bottle, they'd probably bring over another one without a second thought. So what would it matter if one of these disappeared? Yeah, I always dilute it before drinking so I'd be able to enjoy one bottle of wine for a pretty long time. Despite being in the entrance, I belatedly looked around, grabbed a bottle, ran into my room, and then pushed it into the winter futon in my closet that I wouldn't use for a while. Actually, my parents live here too, so I won't have many chances to drink. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a glass, ice, a corkscrew, and a carton of orange juice, then ran back into my room. I put the corkscrew on the wine bottle and was overwhelmed by the urge to wet my tongue with the nostalgic flavor as soon as I could. How was I supposed to survive in this world without enjoying a good wine? Ah, so true, Rika. I poured some into the glass, and just listening to the orange juice splashing in to fill it made my mouth water like a dog. If I dilute it this much, it'll look just like orange juice from the outside. But it was the nostalgic flavor that belonged to my world. At one time, this had been the flavor of my tears of defeat, shed for the unbreakable June of 1983. But now, even those tears of defeat felt sweet and tender. Those dead-end worlds were very painful. But I was still surrounded by my kind friends. I had the leeway to choose to surrender to Takano and continue lazily living in that infinite loop. But even the warmth was absent in this world. This made a week now since I came here. With no prospects of returning to my previous world, I resolved myself to staying here for a long time, but a week in, it had already driven me to drink. It'll be fine. Those worlds had driven me to the same state, and I still managed, lazily doing my best as I soaked in wine, right? I needed to be released from this Rika Furude quickly. Nobody in this world would understand that, even if I explained it. That meant I had no allies here. If I told someone, they'd think I'd gone crazy. But considering this world's Rika Furude, that was only natural. This world's Rika Furude was a dour girl without a single friend, and one day she'd been hit by a ball in the schoolyard and started saying she didn't belong in this world. If that big doctor, Yamamoto, heard about this, he'd probably make a huge fuss about the impact having caused brain damage. But that would make the most sense to the people who live here. At the very least, until I arrived, Rika Furude was Rika Furude, the correct being for this world. Maybe it was more appropriate to say that one day, I, someone different from this world's Rika, appeared, then took over Rika's body. Right. Am I not Rika Furude? Well, no. This world's Rika Furude was this world's Rika Furude, different being than me. I'd simply been interpreting her as being the same as me even when I was in different worlds, until now. When I thought about that, leaving aside whether I'd been living happily, I felt like I'd done something bad to this world's Rika Furude. Of course, it was too late to apologize now, and I couldn't give this body back to her anymore. If there was a way to apologize, it'd be to acknowledge this world's Rika Furude as a being of her own. Because if I called myself Rika Furude, the girl who already existed would vanish from this life. Which meant the only way to apologize was to not call myself Rika Furude. Well, that had been bothering me for a long time. I've long felt that my young self, pampered as the reincarnation of Odashiro-sama, and my old self, who had awakened and traveled countless worlds, had different personalities. But if I thought of them not as personalities, but as different beings entirely, right now I was no longer Rika Furude. Who am I? I stared vacantly at the wine bottle. Did I like this brand? My father always loved to drink this wine. As a result, I'd borrowed it in countless worlds, and I'd love to drink it even now. Right now, I couldn't even be lazy without borrowing the power of alcohol, and this wine comforted me, just a little. At this point, I couldn't go on living without this wine, so, in other words, I wasn't alive, but the wine was, which meant I wasn't Rika Furude, and that I was the wine. I stared at the Western letters of the brand name written on the wine label, which I didn't know how to pronounce, and thought to myself that it was the name of me. My name is Rika Furude. No, not that, but this Burn Castell. I don't know what that means. Maybe I'll ask my father. Federica Burn Castell. I just have like a year's worth of Umineko reading just flooding back to me in this moment. Oh my god. I gotta stretch. Oh god. Okay, we're fine. Everything's fine. Ah, whatever. What a silly name that is. Ha, 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 ha. My thoughts began to slur and muddle. Cheers to this shithole of a world. Ah. I still want to read maybe a bit more before we switch. I wanted to hit at least an hour, so let's try to see if we can read another little chunk here if it's possible. Rika says, "Thank you for making my food all the time." Nipa. What's this all of a sudden? Mother's Day was a long time ago. As I thanked my mother and patted her shoulders, I brushed her head. It was all a show, of course. If she had the same power inside of her as Hanyu, then by touching her like this, I'd be able to sense it, even if it was feeble. If I did feel that power from my mother, could I kill her on the spot? I wouldn't hesitate to kill, but I couldn't say I wouldn't hesitate right here and now. Because I'd rather she not have the power inside her. And at the same time, I was uneasy about what to do next if she didn't. My mother laughed like it tickled, but contrary to what she thought, I was carefully checking if I needed to kill her. Thank you. You've made your point, so please get off. It tickles. Damn. Mom's like, get the fuck off me. My mother told me that was enough, smiling in a way that was not as dissatisfied as her words implied. Even after being so scrupulous about touching her, I couldn't feel any trace of the power. My mother wasn't the one who held the fragment. And I'd already felt my father's head. It wasn't him either. If it wasn't either of the two people closest to the legend of Oishiro-sama, then it was improbable that the fragment was in a person. It was a happy thing, not having to kill anyone, but that meant one of my clues was now meaningless. That said, even though the possibility was unlikely, I'd still have to touch the heads of the other people in the village every chance I got, just to make sure. And, at the same time, I had to continue my deciphering of the pile of documents in the ritual implement storehouse. Whichever I was supposed to choose, the labor of reading through that entire mountain or the sin of killing someone, I was going to need much more than a little time. I lost track of how many mornings it had been since I drifted to this world, and this morning was frustratingly the same as the last world, the one I knew. They said next Sunday was the Watanagashi festival. This was the first time I didn't care whatsoever about it. For Hinamizawa, facing total eviction by next year, this would be their very last festival. They were apparently planning to put on a magnificent show to end things with. My normal world responsibility of performing a dedication dance as the last survivor of the Fude family didn't exist in this world either. Still, I wasn't expected to simply go off and have fun. They would have me help with things that kids could help with, like giving out boiled rice and answering the phone. I'd gotten used to going to school alone, too. When I went to school with Satoko, it was always a lively morning with us running and falling everywhere. But that, too, was beginning to feel like a memory of the distant past. With several days already behind me, and my mind settled, I'd stopped crying about small memories like that. Everything I did was for the sake of returning to my original world. I might curse the trouble it was taking, but I would never cry again. So even when I met Satoko at the school gate and said good morning, only to be bluntly ignored like always, it didn't make me sad. The real Satoko was an incomparable friend of mine. Even if a fake Satoko ignored me, it wouldn't hurt me inside anymore. Mion wasn't outright cold like Satoko was, but she didn't seem to think of me as any more than one of her many classmates. Reina seemed like she was actually trying to talk to me, but that was because I was isolated. She was acting out of a kind of pity, and it seemed sadder to accept that. So I'd started reacting nastily to Reina's unwanted attention. After just a few exchanges like that, she realized I didn't want her doing this and stopped bothering me. Being all alone wasn't sad anymore. It was only natural I'd be alone as an outsider to this false world. In fact, the less annoying acquaintances I needed, the easier it was for me. That's right, easier. When I started feeling that way, then even if nobody talked to me during lunch, nobody invited me to eat with them, and nobody asked me to play after school, I was totally okay with it. With so few students in the classroom, if I took out a book not related to the class, GA would confiscate it right away. I probably wouldn't be able to read the old documents like she was teaching, while she was teaching. So all I could do was wrap them in covers I made from flipping over leaflets and folding them, and spend my free time at school pretending I was reading a regular book. We weren't allowed to bring comics to school, but the unspoken agreement was that you could read novels as long as you didn't do it during class. If I could just ignore the hustle and bustle, lunch break was the time I could focus the most. Somewhere in those countless words, there was a time when I got bored with my daily life and read a lot of old documents. Thanks to that, I knew the gist of their contents. I just hoped there was a clue somewhere in them about the fragment rejecting Hanyu from this world. It had been raining since midday. All of my classmates had stayed in the classroom for break, venting their pent-up energy indoors. Thanks to that, it was a bothersome, loud, and uncomfortable day for me. What's with that gloomy look? What are you reading? At the same time as those words, my old document was taken from me. And there was Satoko's face smiling evilly. What the heck? I can't read this. Satoko looked at the old document she'd stolen from me with disgust. Well, someone as ignorant as Satoko had no way to understand it. I learned how to read classical Japanese from my father, and even I had to go over each line several times to figure it out. Of course, for Satoko, it wasn't about what it said. She seemed more amused at how unsanitary it looked with dirty letters written on the dirty paper. But even if it was nothing more than a filthy book to her, to me it was something that could hold a clue. When I tried to snatch it back, she threw it to another friend, as though she'd seen the attempt coming miles away. What is this? Ugh, it's gross. The girl who caught it threw it to another kid. And that kid, after his face scrunched up at the filth being given to him, grinned like an idiot and threw it to someone else. Dude, Arika needs to start swinging. Rika needs to just have fists out and start swinging everywhere. Over here, pass it. Over here. Mion-san, pass. Several of my classmates threw it amongst themselves whenever I chased after it, teasing me. At some point, Mion had joined their circle, and it turned into a classroom-wide bullying. Today wasn't the first time this had happened. Actually, maybe before I came here, it was always like this. Even in a classroom with just 10 people, an order existed, and so did cliques. Belonging to none, and not wanting to, I was the weakling in the room, and thus clearly the one it was okay to torment. Reina was the only one who said they should stop, but nobody listened to her. My classmates wanted to fool around, and they probably wanted to tell her that I was the only toy in the room, so why shouldn't they play it with her during lunch break? But in the last few days, it had left heartwarming territory and moved into aggravating territory. The Satoko clearly treated me with spite. When I thought about it now, the accident with the ball in the schoolyard that brought me into this world, she'd obviously been aiming for Rika, who had been just standing there in the yard. Was Satoko always this oblivious to the pain of others? She'd understood people's pain best, because even though she said mean things, she'd been through the worst of anyone. I see. In this world, Satoko's parents were alive and the villagers didn't torment her. In other worlds, she hadn't been through the worst of anyone. Personality isn't wholly determined from birth. It's also something cultivated over many events and experiences. With all her lucky dice rolls, this was how Satoko's personality turned out in this world. In other words, this Satoko was only the same on the outside, but a completely different person from my best friend on the inside. Once I understood that, the sadness of Satoko tormenting me disappeared. And in its place, she began to look like a horrible brat just getting in the way of my haste to return to my original world. Don't bother me. I don't care what any of you do in this lunatic world. But I'm desperately working to return to my original one, so stay out of my way. Come on, Furude-san. Over here! Over here! The old document made its way back to Satoko again. This time, Satoko started teasing me, weaving it around and saying to come get it. She held her nose and made a sour face like she was holding up something filthy, earning laughs and jeers from the rest of class. I went straight for Satoko, and of course, she threw it to the next one in line. She must have thought it would make me go over there next. But I didn't care about where the document was. Instead, I charged straight at Satoko. I tucked my nails into the bases of my fingers and clenched my fist. I decided this was the fastest method to explain how important this was, make her understand, and prevent any reprisals. All in a very short period of time. I swung my right fist at Satoko's face. The tip of my fist plowed into her face below her left eye, leaving an imprint that wouldn't soon disappear. Yeah, I promptly grabbed a clump of her hair and pushed her to the floor, then took a nearby chair and raised it over my head before smashing it into her a few times. Oh my god. Satoko didn't know what had just happened. Confused by the sudden violence, she just curled up like a turtle. It looked a little crazy hitting her with a chair like this, but it wouldn't hurt her very badly. I raised the chair, then slammed it down over top of Satoko's upper body. She's pulling out wrestling moves, exactly as if to hold her to the ground. I lifted my foot above the chair and stomped on it like I was hammering in a nail.
Satoko, anta skoshi urusai.
Satoko, you're being a little annoying.
私の親友と同じ顔してるから、ちょっと多めに見てきたけど。
I was tolerating you since you look like a friend of mine.
いい加減。あんたのその甲高い声にもイラついてきたわ。
But that shrill voice of yours is really starting to get on my nerves.
以後、私の半径1メートル以内に入ったら、言い訳なしで即ぶん殴るから、そのつもりでよろしく。
If you come within 1 meter of me, I'll punch you right away. No excuses. Hope that's alright.
聞いてる?
Are you listening? I stomped on the chair again and finally saw an expression of fear arrive on Satoko's face. I knew this was the best answer. When given the chance, I had to give it to her straight. But it made me mad. I was the last one in the world who wanted to see Satoko looking like that. I was the one who was forcing her to make that expression. It made me sick. But it was fine, in the end. This Satoko wasn't the one I knew, after all. And one day I'd leave this world for sure. Even if I killed her on the spot, it wouldn't have anything to do with Satoko of my world. That's why it didn't hurt inside at all, seeing her look at me so terrified. Come on, give Rika-chan her book back. Here, Rika-chan. Rina plucked her the document from a bewildered classmate and returned it to me. So forgive Satoko-chan, okay? You went a little too far. Hmm?
なら、私の大切な本を奪って貴重な読書の時間の邪魔をするのは大してやりすぎではない。
Then stealing my important book and cutting into my precious reading time wasn't going too far?
そういう意味じゃなくて。
That isn't what I meant.
当事者じゃないなら引っ込んでて。
You don't have anything to do with this, so step aside.
私はこれを取り戻せて満足よ。
I just wanted to get this back. I kicked the chair over, indicating to Satoko that she'd been released. But even that action made her so scared that she was frozen in place. I didn't waste time going back to my own seat. Then Satoko began to bawl shamelessly, and Satoshi ran over, making a big, overprotective fuss about the nurse's office and whatnot. The noise quickly reached the faculty room, and Chie and the principal soon burst in.
大丈夫ですか、Satokoさん?
Are you alright, Satoko-san?
これはあざになるかもしれませんね。
This might leave a bruise.
サトシ君、保健室へ連れて行って休ませてください。
Satoshi-kun, please take her to the nurse's office and have her rest.
私は山本先生を呼んできます。
I'll call Yamamoto-sensei. While Chie was talking, the principal must have asked Mion what had happened in the classroom. Mion spoke to him in hushed tones, glancing my way. She was probably saying she had no part in this. Nasty Mion might say that. Damn. She didn't betray my expectation. Principal came over to me and told me to come with him to the principal's office. This usually happens when a bullied child happens to bully back. A side effect of the bullying, perhaps. I was seriously fed up with everything, but my goal had only been to scare Satoko off. From bothering me ever again. Now that I'd done that, I decided I needed to calm the situation down. After being brought to the principal's office, he kept asking me why I punched Satoko, and lectured me that violence was never the answer. But regarding her taking my book and tormenting me, he admitted she was at fault, and I felt a little relieved. This is a fairly difficult book. Oh, that's voice again. Is it from your house, Furude-kun? Kun?
まあそんなところなのです。
Yes, something like that.
わしも古文は嫌いではないが、これはなかなかに難読だ。
I don't dislike classical Japanese, but this one seems fairly difficult.
君には読めるのかね?
Can you read this?
読めなきゃ読みませんです。
If I couldn't, I wouldn't have been reading it.
それは道理である。
You do have a point.
どういう内容のことが書いてあるのか、少し校長先生にも教えてくれんかね?
Would you mind telling me a little about what's written in here? His behavior wasn't one out of interest in the book, so much as an act dripping with pity, like he wanted to ease the mind of someone alienated and bullied in class a little. Accepting that would do nothing but further amplify my current unhappiness.
別に友達なんか欲しくないし、校長先生に友達になっても欲しくありません。
I don't want friends anyway, and I don't want to be your friend. I don't want you to be my friend either, Sensei.
もういいのですか?
May I leave now?
私はその続きを一刻も早く読み進めたいのです。
I want to continue reading as soon as possible.
フルデ君。
Furude-kun.
読書もいいが、たまには友達に混じって遊ぶのもいいこととは思わんかね?
It's good to read books, but don't you think you should play with your friends once in a while? And what friends?
私の友達は別の遠い場所にいます。
My friends are somewhere else, far away.
ここにはいないので興味ないです。
They're not here, so I don't care.
その手痛まないかね?
Does that hand hurt at all?
え?
Huh?
ああ。
Oh. I didn't realize it until the principal pointed it out. I must have scraped the skin on my hand when I punched Satoko as hard as I could. A little bit of blood was seeping from my right fist.
保健室に山本先生が来てるから、行って手当てをしてもらいなさい。
Yamamoto-sensei is in the nurse's office, so go see him and get that bandaged up.
そうします。
I will.
フルデ君。
Furude-kun.
学校は勉強をするだけのところじゃない。
School isn't only for studying.
友達を作るところでもあるぞ。
It's also for making friends.
少しそこを肝に。
I'd like you to take that too.
失礼しますです。
Excuse me?
ペコリ。
Bows. This world's principal wasn't the principal who was allowed to lecture me, so I didn't have any desire to listen. Fuck that guy. On my way to the nurse's office, I passed the classroom. I met eyes with several students inside, but they immediately looked away. Maybe this will work out. I'm more comfortable with them being scared than teasing me. When I went into the nurse's office, the doctor was just putting a big piece of absorbent cotton under Satoko's eye. Chie, who was with her, looked at me, then walked over with a scary look on her face.
さあ二人とも
Okay, you two.
さとこさんはご本を取ってごめんなさいと
Satoko-san, apologize for taking your book.
フルデさんは殴ってごめんなさいと
And
互い
Furude-san,
に謝りなさい
apologize for punching her. Satoko, who had been scared and weak in the face of sudden violence earlier, must have calmed down since she now looked dejected. She looked like it didn't make sense to her, how she was only teasing me a little, and then I suddenly went crazy for no reason and hit her. If she was like that, there's no way she would apologize first. Of course, I had no duty to apologize either, so I wouldn't apologize first.
ほら二人とも
Come on, both of you.
お互い謝らないならいつまでもこのままですよ
You're going to stay here until you apologize to one another. Chie yelled at us. Clearly making a sour face, I held my bleeding fist out to Yamamoto.
出血してるじゃないかね。
Oh, you're bleeding.
座りなさい。
Take a seat.
消毒しよ
I'll disinfect it.
二人とも
Both of you.
先生の言うことが聞けませんか
Are you not listening to your teacher?
謝りなさい。
Apologize. I sensed that if we kept making Chie mad, she might tell us to stay after school. What did she think this was? Like hell, I'd let some school I don't care about do their little lecturing nonsense at me. Every second of every minute is precious. I can't waste a single one. Once I understood that, I was the first to act. As Yamamoto disinfected the wound, I smoothly gave her my apology.
北条さん、殴ったりしてごめんなさい。
Hojo-san, I'm sorry for punching you and stuff. Even I was appalled at how insincere my apology was. Chie probably felt the same way, but she at least appreciated the words.
ほら、古出さんは謝りましたよ。
See? Furude-san apologized.
さとこさんも謝りなさい。
Satoko-san, you apologized too.
ご本を取っていたずらしてすみませんでした。
I'm very sorry for taking your book and playing a joke on you. Satoko's own apology was no less disingenuous than mine. I glared straight into Satoko's eyes, warning her never to bother me again. But Satoko was in her rebellious phase. It would take a lot more than that to make her wince. She returned my glare in kind, as if to say she'd get me back next time. Chie sighed, unable to do much about our insincere apologies. And then the bell signaling the end of lunch break rang.
ではさとこさん、教室に戻りましょう。
Satoko-san, let's go back to the classroom.
古出さんも手当てが終わったらすぐに戻ってくるように。
Furude-san, you come back as soon as you're patched up. Chie followed Satoko and left the nurse's office. I didn't give them as much as a glance and just held my right hand out to Yamamoto. The stinging pain of the disinfectant was somehow weak. The hand receiving treatment didn't even feel like my hand. I suppose it wouldn't. It's Rika Furude's hand, not mine.
みんな今年で学校がおしまいになってしまうのが寂しいんだな。
Everyone must feel lonely that school is ending next year.
君もだろう？
Aren't you?
別にそういうわけじゃない。
No, not really.
住み慣れた故郷が湖底に沈むんだ。
After living here your whole lives, your homeland will sink into a lake.
悲しくないわけがないよ。
That has to be sad.
君たちの気持ちもよくわかるさ。
I understand how you all feel. That must have been Yamamoto's interpretation of the strained atmosphere in the classroom. If he was convinced of that, then maybe it was fine. It didn't matter to me.
君だってちょっと前までは友達がいっぱいいた。
Even you had a lot of friends until not too long ago.
でもたまたま君と特に仲がいい友達がみんな揃って転校しちゃったんだよな。
But everyone you got along with happened to transfer schools at the same time.
君が突然一人ぼっちになってしまった寂しい気持ちはわしもよくわかる。
I'm no stranger to how sad it feels to be suddenly left all alone.
仲の良かった友達です
Friend?
か。
Friends I got along with?
ほら富田君や岡村君たちさ。
Tomita-kun and Okamura-kun and the rest, of course.
いっつも仲良しの男子たちと一緒にいたじゃないか。
You always spent time with the boys since you got along with them, didn't you?
君はこう一点で随分可愛がられていたと思うけど。
I think they were pretty partial to you as the only girl in their group, though. I see. Even Rika Furude had friends for a while in this world. And thanks to a stroke of bad luck, they all transferred out together and left her behind.
でも友達は彼らだけじゃないんじゃないかね。
But they're not only your friend, but they're not your only friends out there, right?
寂しい気持ちもわかるし、来年までの仲かもしれないけど、クラスの他の子とも友達になって楽しくやっていった方が君にとってもいいんじゃないかい？
I understand how lonely you feel, and you may only know them until next year, but I would think it would be good for you to make friends with the other kids in class and enjoy your time with them.
別に親しくなりたくなんかないし、
I don't want to get close to them.
私の本当の友達はあなたの言う通り遠くへ行ってしまったわ。
My real friends, as you said, they went far away.
とてもとても遠くへね。
Very, very far away.
私はそこへ帰りたいだけ。
All I want is to go there.
リカちゃんはいつからそんな大人びた話し方をするようになったのかね？
When did you start talking so much like a grown-up, Rika-chan?
まあ気分です。
I guess I just feel like it.
先日 君がボールを頭にぶつけて気絶した一件以来、君がこれまで見せなかった暗い表情を見せているような気がしてね。
Ever since you got knocked out by the ball the other day, I feel like your expressions have grown darker.
心配してるんだよ。
I'm worried about you. I didn't know how close this Yamamoto man was to Rikafurude, nor how much of her he knew. But judging from his words, he seemed to be the kind of adult who understood children's feelings, just like Irie in the previous world.
あのボールが当たった時、多分フルでリカは死んだと思うんです。
When that ball hit her, I think Rikafurude died.
あれくらいで死んでたらドッジボールもできないよ。
If that was all it took to die, nobody could play dodgeball.
じゃあ、あれで死んでたんなら、君は亡者ということなのかね？
If you died back then, wouldn't that make you a corpse? Yamamoto laughed a little, but not completely to tease me. It was just to urge me further along. Ah, so Yamamoto wasn't just a doctor at the nurse's office, but a mental counselor for students at a susceptible age. It looked like he wasn't Irie's replacement for nothing. For some reason, I felt like opening up a little to him. Maybe it was because he didn't exist in the world I knew. Right now, everyone who was in the world I knew, no matter who it was, made me uncomfortable. That was why I felt like opening up specifically to someone who wasn't in that world. After all, Yamamoto probably thought I was just a girl hitting puberty. Whatever nonsense I spouted, he would nod and agree.
私、山本たちの知ってるフルでリカじゃないんです。
I'm not the Rikafurude you and the others know.
それはどういうことだね？
What does that mean?
じゃあ、君は誰なのかな？
Who are you then?
とりあえずベルンカステルって名乗ることにしました。
For now, I've decided to take the name Bernkastel.
フルでリカって名乗ったらこの体の本来の持ち主に悪いので。
If I called myself Rikafurude, it would be rude to the person who originally had this body.
ベルン？
Burn.
横文字かい？
A German name.
まるで宇宙人みたいだね。
It's almost like you're a space alien.
君はどこから来たんだい？
Where'd you come from?
別の世界からです。
From a different world.
例えるならイフの世界。
If I had to compare it, it's like a world of what ifs.
同じひなみ沢だけど歴史や成り立ちが全く違う世界。
It's still Hinamizawa, but its history and composition are completely different.
この世界ではダム計画が決定して村人の立ち退きが決まっているけれど私の世界は違う。
In this world, they moved forward with the dam project, and the villagers decided to leave, but in my world, it's different.
ダム計画に村人が結束して立ち上がり計画を打倒する。
The villagers stood up together to defeat the project.
そしてダム計画は無期限に凍結された。
And then the government froze it indefinitely.
そういう世界から来ました。
That's the kind of world I came from.
では君の来たひなみ沢はダム湖には沈まないわけか。
Then the Hinamizawa you came from won't end up underwater.
そうです。
That's right.
昭和58年の後もずっとのどかな生活が続いていきます。
Even after 1983, we would keep living there peacefully.
いいひなみ沢だね。
Sounds like a nice Hinamizawa.
わしもこの土地をとても気に入ってるから立ち退きは本当は心苦しい。
I've taken a liking to this area as well, so the eviction is really painful for me.
だから君の来たという世界のひなみ沢に憧れるよ。
Suppose I'm jealous of the Hinamizawa in the world you say you came from.
その世界のひなみ沢をもう少しわしに教えてくれんかね。
Could you tell me more about the one in that world? The first step in counseling was to agree to whatever absurd story the patient came up with. If I didn't know that piece of trivia, I might have teared up at Yamamoto telling me to continue. But I couldn't resist the temptation to keep going. He encouraged me, and I kept talking. In that world, there was a big protest movement we called the Dam Conflict, and it took years for them to withdraw the proposal. And through that conflict, the villagers came together. Everyone got along. All the students were friends. And we even had transfer students come in from outside of the village. And we made a club where we would play games with Mion as the president. And while Satoko was very unfortunate, she was good friends with me. And then...
さとこちゃんがかわいそうだな。
Poor Satoko-chan.
なんでさとこちゃんが村中からいじめられなくちゃいけないんだい？
Why did the village have to bully her like that?
みんな幸せな世界なんだから。さとこちゃんにも意地悪しないで幸せの輪に入れてあげなよ。
If everyone was happy, they shouldn't have been mean to her. They should have let her into their happy circle.
別に意地悪で言ってるわけじゃないわ。
They don't say those things to be mean.
私の世界ではそうというだけの話よ。
That's just how my world is.
それにこの世界のサトコよりは辛い運命をたどるかもしれないけど、そのサトコは私の一番の友達で
And she
他
might
に
have
比べるものなどない唯一無二の親友。
and she might have had a more painful fate than this world's Satoko. But that one was my best friend, when I couldn't replace or compare with anyone.
だからこの世界のサトコの顔が余計に腹が立つの。
So seeing the way Satoko is in this world makes me madder than it should.
その君の本当の親友と同じ顔で君に意地悪をするのが許せない？
You can't tolerate her being mean to you when she looks the same to you as your real friend?
そう。
Yes. Yamamoto heaved a heavy sigh, then stared out the window with his arms folded. It looked like the rain outside had let up somewhat, but it was still drizzling. After keeping his silence for a few moments, Yamamoto spoke up.
つまりここは君の世界じゃないということかい？
What you're saying is, this isn't your world.
そうです。
That's right.
私は元の世界に帰らなければならない。
I need to get back to my original world,
ここは私の世界じゃないんですから。
because this one isn't mine.
確かにそんな楽しいひなみ沢なら一刻も早く元の世界に帰りたいよな。
I can see why you'd want to return to such a fun-sounding Hinamizawa as soon as you could.
でも帰る方法はあるのかね？
But is there even a way to do that?
あります。
There is.
でも探すのはとても大変です。
But it's very hard to find.
ほう、そりゃどんな方法だい？
I see. And what do you have to do?
多分このひなみ沢のどこかにかけらが落ちています。
A fragment is lost somewhere in Hinamizawa, I think.
そのかけらのせいで私を元の世界に戻す力を持ったいえお社様がこの世界へ来られないのです。
Because of that fragment, so a fragment is lost somewhere in Hinamizawa, I think. Because of that fragment, Hanyu, or should I say, Oyashiro-sama, can't come to this world and bring me back.
お社様って古出神社に祀られてるあの神様のお社様？
Oyashiro-sama? You mean the deity worshipped at the Furude Shrine?
説明すると長いですがそんなところです。
It would take too long to explain, but basically yes.
私は彼女と一緒にあまたの世界を巡ってきました。
I've traveled through countless worlds with her.
この世界はその結果に漂着した世界の一つでしかありません。
This world just happens to be one of the ones I drifted to.
だから彼女が来てくれればすぐにでも出ていくつもり。
So as soon as she can get here, I plan on leaving.
急に話が大きくなったね。
That escalated pretty quickly.
つまり君はお社様と一緒にこの世界へ来たわけだ。
In other words, normally you and Oyashiro-sama would come to this world together.
ところが君をこの世界から連れ出せるお社様がどういうわけかこの世界に入れない。
But Oyashiro-sama, the one with the power to bring you out of this world, can't get in for some reason.
つまり君は船が漂流してしまって取り残されたようなものということかね。
Which means you've been left behind like a boat that drifted ashore?
平たく言うとそういうことです。
Generally speaking, yes.
彼女をこちらに呼びたくても彼女を阻害するかけらがこのひなみ沢のどこかにある。
The fragment blocking her is somewhere in Hinamizawa.
それを見つけ出して焼いてしまわないと私は元の世界へ帰れない。
If I don't find it and burn it, I can't go back to my old world.
そのかけらというのはどこにあるんだい？
Where might that fragment be?
どこかにあるの。
Somewhere.
かけらは重い。
A fragment is feelings.
だからそれが宿る何か。
So it has to be something with those in it.
どんな形をしているものに宿っているのかわからないし、宿っているのがものという保証もない。
I don't know what kind of object it resides in, and there's no proof it's in an object at all.
人間に宿っているのかもしれない。
It could be inside a person.
何もわからないんです。
I just don't know.
君は物だったら焼くと言ったね。
You said you'd burn if it was an object, right?
人だったらどうするんだい？
What would you do if it was a person?
羽生は人の場合なら殺すことで同じ意味を
This is
持
not
つと言
something
って
Rika should be saying to him. Hanyu said if it was a person, killing them would amount to the same thing.
かけらを宿すのが人間でないことを祈ってるわ。
I'm praying the fragment isn't residing in a person.
その羽生というのは誰だい？
Who is this Hanyu?
新しい登場人物だね。
A new character?
ああ、お社様の別名よ。
Oh, it's another name for Odashiro-sama.
むしろ羽生が本名。
Hanyu is actually her real name.
お社様なんて名前は後世の村人の誰かがつけた適当な名前じゃない？
I think Odashiro-sama was just the name the villagers gave her later on.
なるほど。それが君の読んでいた本に書いてあったのかな？
I see. Was that written in the book you were reading?
別にそういうわけじゃないわ。
No, not exactly. Yamamoto's arms remained folded, and he groaned in thought. Another silence settled, with rain being the only audible sound. Maybe I'd gotten nervous. I knew it wouldn't solve anything to talk about it, but I did anyway. Yamamoto was probably wondering if something was wrong with my brain. I could guess that by looking at his complicated expression.
そのかけらは見つかりそうかい？
Do you think you'll find the fragment?
わからないわ。
I don't know.
羽生に干渉する力なのだから、お社様にゆかりのある何かにヒントがあるんじゃないかと思って古文書を読んでいるところ。
Since it can interfere with Hanyu, I figured there'd be a clue in something related to Oshiro-sama, which is why I was reading those old documents.
探し物のヒントを探してる。そんな状態ね。
I was searching for a clue to search for the fragment, basically.
そうか。
I see.
見つかるといいね。
I do hope you find it.
でもそれが人だったら君はどうするんだい？
But if it was a person, what would you do?
まさか本当に殺しちゃう気なのかね？
You wouldn't really kill them, would you?
そういう風に聞かれると返答に困るけど、
It's hard to answer when you put it like that, but
それしか元の世界に戻る方法がないなら、
if that
私は躊躇しないかもしれない。
if that was the only way to return to my old world, I might not hesitate.
どうせ私の世界から見れば、この世界は妄想や白チュームと同じ。
After all, from my world's point of view, this world is just a delusion, a daydream.
誰が死んだって私の世界では生きてるし、関係ないもの。
Whoever dies here, they'll be alive in my world, so it doesn't matter.
なるほどなるほど。
I see, I see.
でもちょっと待ちなさい。
But hold on a moment.
君にとってこの世界は夢の中なのかもしれないが、わしにとってはここは自分の世界でね。
This world might just be a dream to you, but it's a real world for me.
たとえ誰であっても殺されちゃ困る。
It wouldn't be good if someone was killed, no matter who it was.
理屈は分かってるし、私も人殺しなんてせずに帰れるなら、それに越したことはないわ。
I understand your logic, and I want nothing more than to get out of here without having to kill someone.
話題を戻そう。
Let's get back on track.
君に元の世界への帰り方を教えてくれるその羽生はどうやって君にそれを伝えるんだい？
This Hanyu, who tells you about how to get back to your old world. How does she tell you that?
お告げみたいなものがあるのかい？
Is it something like a divine message?
それとも夢枕に立つ？
Or does she appear in your dreams?
そんな曖昧なものじゃない。
No, nothing that vague.
会話するのよ。
I talked to her.
ある水晶玉が
羽生と私の通信機の役目を果たすの。
There's a crystal ball that acts as a communicator between us.
わしもその羽生と話すことはできるかね。
Would I be able to talk to this Hanyu as well? That would be the fastest way. If you could talk to Hanyu directly, that would be enough to prove my nonsense true. But I felt uneasy. Even if I could talk to her, Yamamoto might not be able to. Those kinds of magic items come up purely often in stories. But maybe it was worth a shot trying. I took the crystal ball out of my pocket.
そのビー玉が通信機かい？
That marble is a communicator?
やっぱりそう思うわよね。
That's what it looks like, right?
私もビー玉だと思ったわ。
I thought the same thing. Crystal ball's light was extremely weak. As it got dimmer, it was also taking long to restore lately. After talking to her several days ago and the light weakened again, it was having a hard time recovering. This much light wasn't quite enough. It looked like it needed a little bit more time to recover.
このビー玉に光が宿ってるのがわかる？
Can you see the light in this marble?
どうだろう。
I wonder.
光の反射じゃないかい？
Maybe it's just reflecting light.
でも綺麗なビー玉だね。
But it is very pretty.
ラムネ瓶の玉かい？
Is it from a ramune bottle?
とんでもない。
Of course not.
フルデ神社の至宝。カムのなんたらとかいうありがたい宝だそうよ。
It's a Fruited Shrine treasure called the Kamuno something, and we should be grateful for it.
ラムネ瓶の玉に見えるって点では悪いけど私も同感ね。
It's rude of me to say, but I agree that it looks like a Ramune bottle marble to me too.
フルデ神社。
Ramune? From the Fruited Shrine.
これでどうやって羽生と会話を？
So how do you use this to talk to Hanyu?
私は額に当てるようにするわ。
I put it to my forehead. I swear I'm not crazy.
すると声が聞こえるの。
When I do, I can hear her voice. Yamamoto immediately tried. He shut his eyes and let out a low groan. It probably wouldn't work. I couldn't tell if it was because it wasn't me or because the power was too weak.
申し訳ないが、わしには聞こえんな。
I'm sorry, but I can't hear anything.
君はどうだね？
What about you?
羽生と話すにはある程度の力が回復してないといけない。
It needs to recover a certain amount of power to talk to Hanyu.
貸して。
Let me have it.
私でもダメね。
Doesn't work for me either.
まだ回復しきっていない水晶玉では
You
羽
can't
生の声を聞くことができないわ。
you can't hear Hanyu's voice if the crystal ball doesn't have all its power. I pushed it tightly against my forehead, but all I felt was a cool sensation. I couldn't feel the power in it.
そうか。
I see.
それは残念だな。
That's a shame.
日数を重ねると多少は力が回復するようなの。
In a few days, some of the power should return.
時間をもらえればきっとまた会話ができるようになるわ。
If you give me time, I'm sure I'll be able to talk to her again.
その時もう一度試してもらえれば。
If you let me try again, then.
そうかい。
I see.
じゃあもし会話ができるようになったら、ぜひわしにも会話をさせてくれないかね。
Then once you talk to her, then once you can talk to her, would you mind letting me talk to her, talk as well?
ええ、もちろんよ。
Yes, of course.
このままじゃ頭が変になったおかしなことを思われて終わりだもの。
At this rate, you'll think I'm crazy in the head and it'll all be over.
その失礼な誤解を解かなくちゃ後味が悪いわ。
It would leave a bad taste in my mouth if I didn't clear up such a rude misunderstanding.
その水晶玉の神通力はどのくらいの時間を待てば回復するんだい？
How long does it take for the crystal ball's divine power to recover?
もう少しだと思
Not much longer, I think.
う。もう一晩も待てばひょっとすると大丈夫かもしれない。
It might even be fine after one more night.
力が戻ったらあなたに教えるわ。
Once its power comes back, I'll tell you.
ありがとう。待ってるよ。
Thank you. I'll be waiting.
もし羽生と話をさせてくれたら、わしも君が元の世界へ帰れるように協力しようじゃないか。
If you do let me talk to Hanyu, how about I help you go back to your old world too?
どうだね？
Does that sound good?
本当に
Really? The simple word help made a deep impression on my mind. If someone other than Hanyu were around to understand me, it would obviously be a reassurance. And with two people, the time it would take to go through the piles of literature would be halved. I'd welcome the help of a cat at this point, so I was really glad. On the other hand, I had to think about what Yamamoto felt. For Yamamoto, right now, I was a dangerous person who said she might even commit murder over a delusion. He was only speaking to me in such an understanding way to try and keep communication going. Didn't really mean he actually believed me. But if Hanyu and Yamamoto could talk, it would clear all those fears away, and then he'd have to believe in the supernatural phenomenon of Hanyu and me. But the real world didn't usually work out that well. After all, even if I made Hanyu talk to him, it could only end in the way it always does, with Yamamoto not hearing anything. I could convey what she was saying, but he wouldn't believe it. But that didn't mean I had the option of not trying. I wouldn't give up before doing it. I'd try everything. Wasn't that the lesson I'd learned from this 100-year journey?
約束よ
Promise me.
ちゃんと羽生と話ができたら信じて
If you can talk to Hanyu, you have to believe me.
会う会うしか言わないおよそ神様っぽくないやつだけどね
Even though all she says is ow ow and doesn't really act like a god.
約束するよ。
I promise.
羽生と話をさせてくれたら君の話を信じよ
If you let me talk to Hanyu, I'll believe your story.
う。でももし羽生と話ができなかったらどうする？
But if I can't talk to her, what will you do? I didn't actually think he'd reply like that, and it confused me.
どうするって言われても
What do you mean? What will I do?
君が勝ったら君の話を信じる約束になってる。
I promise to believe your story if you win.
じゃあわしが勝ったら君がわしの話を信じるという約束にしないかな。
Then why not promise me that if I win, you'll believe my story?
どうだね？公平だろ？
That sounds fair, doesn't it?
山本の何の話を信じろと
What story do you want me to believe? Well, I could imagine it without having to ask. He'd probably tell me to go to the largest hospital and have my head given a proper look at. Of course, there's absolutely nothing wrong with my head, so it'd come up with 0 results. When that happened, maybe they'd say I need to take care of my mind and give me psychotropic drugs or something. I heard this from Rina once before. There's a drug that makes you incredibly lethargic, unable to do or even think anything at all. Dangerous patients think terrible things and sometimes actually do them. The drug stopped that from happening. If they made me take that, it would be the same as killing me. It might seem like a fair condition, but it looked to me like the scales weren't in my favor to begin with. I shouldn't have told this stuff to a man I barely knew. After all that, I began to regret my decision. Could I fool him if I said it was all a joke? Did you believe me? Nipa! If that was going to be my last resort, I could use it if my attempt to have Yamamoto and Hanyu communicate failed. I couldn't abandon the possibility that Yamamoto could be my ally without trying first.
じゃあ明日はちゃんとリカちゃんのために予定を空けておこう。
Then I'll keep a slot open tomorrow just for you, Rika-chan.
それでいいかい？
Does that sound good? He made a suggestion, taking a notebook out of his coat and going over his other appointments. I nodded and said I agreed. Ah. Oh, what a cliffhanger. What a cliffhanger we end on.
リカちゃん
Get out of here, Satoshi. Go ahead and save. Okay. Let's see. Let's get Project Eden's Garden loaded up here. I'll actually throw up a BRB. I'm gonna go stretch my legs for just a couple minutes here. I will get this all loaded up. Let's throw this. Okay, I'll be back shortly. Project Eden's Garden. We'll do the trial. We'll do it in one sitting, no matter how long it takes. Promise. We'll do that. And I'll be back shortly. I'm gonna go get some water and stuff. So let me update the category and all that before I forget later. How do I spell project? Perfect. Okay. I'll be back very shortly. Give me just a few minutes.